Hey everybody! New episode of Rocket to the Cloud coming right up.
Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Engine running. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes.
Welcome everyone to a new episode of Rocket to the Cloud, the interview series where we talk to leaders and decision makers in software development and especially in the cloud computing space. As always, this show is made possible by Booster. What is Booster exactly? Let me tell you all about it. Booster is the fastest way to build production-ready, event-driven applications for the cloud. Just write your business logic, provide your cloud provider credentials, and let the Booster framework take care of everything else for you. Using the framework's high-level abstractions and conventions, as well as TypeScript's type system, all the cloud infrastructure gets inferred from the code, making it a truly serverless experience. Booster is an open source initiative by the Agile Monkeys. Learn more about Booster by visiting booster.cloud, and check out all the other cool things the Agile Monkeys are up to by visiting theagilemonkeys.com. You'll find links in the description. For this episode, we had a great conversation with Taylor Dolezal. He is a developer advocate at HashiCorp, the fine folks responsible for Terraform, Vagrant, and a host of other awesome tools. Taylor told us about his role as developer advocate and CNCF Ambassador, what HashiCorp products that he thinks that are the best, and he also told us about his time working at Disney. Would you believe that they use Kubernetes at Disney? But, wait a minute, is that a ship's wheel that Mickey Mouse is maneuvering on Steamboat Willie? Ha ha, now it all makes sense. Anyway, enough of my yakking. Here's the interview. All right, Taylor, welcome to the show. Welcome to Rocket to the Cloud. It is an absolute pleasure to have you here as our guest.
Happy to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah, so we want to cover a lot of things, all related to your position as a developer advocate at HashiCorp and also the stuff that you've done in the past, with Disney. So we're going to be talking about a lot of stuff. And I actually want to start out talking about Disney. So I think first question would be, is your name in the credits for any of the Avengers or Star Wars movies?
I actually got to play one of the Avengers, but you just couldn't recognize they had a mask on. It was just Iron Man, something like that. But no, unfortunately, did not get into the credits. I did have a couple of colleagues that did, and so even though working within Disney Studios, a couple other groups like animation and some other things, I've got a colleague who's now at Amazon, Justin Garrison, and he has his name in the credits of like Big Hero 6 and Moana and a couple other places. But yeah, I think at some point in time we'll try to get into an IMDb credit here or there. But very fun to work on those movies. It was really fun over certain weekends and different dates where a movie would be coming out, and then friends would ask in the before times, hey, can you hang out? And then, oh, no, I got to work on Star Wars. It's coming out this weekend. I'm sure you've heard of that. So it made for some fun conversations for sure.
So what's the kind of work that you had to do at Disney? So what kind of problems did you have to work on that required the use of your expertise, which is cloud native technology?
So great question. When I started at Disney, I worked on mostly with so I was a systems engineer at Disney when I started and was really focused on working with the theatrical teams. And they had quite a few applications. Some of them were, like a taxonomy of all of the theaters that they would put movies in. If they had like smell-o-vision or 4D or time warp technology, things like that was kind of cool to see. Wow. And then kind of helped out with just overall theatrical distribution. So the way that the movie industry works is such that either, some places have like a satellite feed, and I think that's kind of what's preferred, right, is to be able to ship this data directly to a place that would show a movie, whether it be a cruise ship, whether it be a theater, or just, whatever it might be. Somebody has an awesome home theater and they have the capability for that. Fantastic. That would be kind of cool. But we were able to kind of standardize on Kubernetes on that front to run all of those applications.
But wait a minute. So it's not like in the old school. I thought, the studios would ship cans of film over to the theaters. So maybe I'm stuck way in the past. I don't know how the movie business works nowadays. So that's why I'm asking.
Yeah. So now it's I don't believe that film is shipped so much in that fashion anymore. It's more like hard drives, and other sources. I do remember when I was growing up, I had a friend whose dad ran a movie theater, and so got to see them thread the film and set up all the cameras to play the movies and things on that front. But yeah, I think now it's mostly kind of shifted to being a hard drive, and then working with distributors and people on that front to actually run the movies around. And then once the theaters have that file, it's encrypted. And the way that a lot of studios have it set up are that you basically buy a 7-day code to be able to play and run the movie. And so even though if you have the file, every 7 days it's going to switch out in terms of how you're actually able to play that and to run that. So I thought that was very interesting to kind of, I had not known that before when it came to movie distribution and how that actually all works.
Yeah, this is all news to me as well. So what things specific to the movie business proved to be like big challenges in terms of software solutions using cloud native tooling? Like you mentioned, how did you get Disney to use Kubernetes of all things?
So really, that was a decision that we made as a group because we were very much working within, Disney's an enterprise and they use all kinds of technologies all over the place. I think that's one of the things I really liked about working there was that each division had its own CTO, and so you could come up with the best approach that worked for you. If you had better success with this mail provider, or if you wanted to write in Ruby or whatever it might be, if that made sense for your team, that's kind of what you were encouraged and enabled to do, which I thought was fantastic. If we dictated that everything must be done this one size fits all way, we'd lose, we might gain a little bit in our agility and our ability to push things out if we standardize on things like that. But when you set it at the top level of the organization, that becomes, that can kind of hold you back in some regards, depending on what you're looking to do, whether it be, data science, shipping movies, what is your use case? So one of the things that I think was unique and interesting to Disney was getting to immediately focus on things from an international perspective. And so, when you start talking about multi-cloud or multi-region, those conversations and things came up. But I'd say that just having to have that, expectation set, day one, this is not just going to go out to maybe 5 or 10 people, but this is going to go out worldwide. What you actually do, an outage that pops up might actually affect the entire world, which is kind of no sweat whatsoever when you hear something like that. But when it comes to Kubernetes, I think that we had seen so many application teams trying to figure things out from an infrastructure perspective. A stakeholder would come forward, say that they need this application. That team would work on that, and then they'd say, okay, we have to go live. Where is the software developer or the systems engineering team at? And then it would kind of always be like just in time solving these problems, which was not ideal. So the more that we kind of shifted into a DevOpsy mindset, that was really coming to a head right when I started back in 2016. And so the teams are like, okay, we have to work together. We can't create these silos. We have to when we work together, it just operates so much more smoothly. And so I think I came in at just the right time. Was really happy to kind of enter when everyone was like, there is a better way to do this. Let's figure that out. And we tried a few different approaches, but that was when containers were coming about, and we saw Mesos, we saw Kubernetes, we Rancher and Cattle and kind of all of these orchestration methods that came out, and so at the time worked a little bit with Rancher, but ended up once Kubernetes hit its full swing, we jumped into that, which worked out really well, because then we were able to communicate with developers and other teams in a worthwhile way. We had some defaults that we could set. We had, this is a deployment, this is a service, and then having all of that nomenclature in those agreed upon terms to refer to everything as and to communicate to teams in that context, it just made things a lot easier. And so I think that was quite helpful.
It's really interesting what you're saying, because the attitude that Disney had toward trying to innovate and trying to stay up to date with what's going on out there. You said that containers were coming out, so you guys adopted containers because oftentimes movie studios or the movie business is criticized for being very backward thinking, and especially with regards to like the business side of things, like enforcing DRM for copyright. Disney Plus, it took years after Netflix and Amazon Prime Video came out for Disney Plus to come on board. But at the same time, the movie business is always innovating with regards to the stuff to make movies, like in special effects, right? So I think it's very interesting what you're saying, that Disney was always was very forward thinking with regards to adopting new cloud native technologies, and that you guys were also given a lot of freedom to innovate.
I think that was really what made the job fun, in my opinion, was that ability to innovate and to have those conversations. It wasn't just the yeah, I know that there's this new and shiny thing over here. Yes, it might have a couple reasons why this might be better, but we're just used to doing it this way. Let's just stick with it. I think the overall attitude from a lot of the teams was like, hey, we know there's a better way to do this. We don't we don't enjoy waking up at 3 a.m. Can we make this better? Can we make this self-healing? Can we set up these checks? Can we make this a better experience for everyone when it comes to shipping these applications? And I think it's just such a breath of fresh air to work in a place like that, where that is the sentiment, and you don't just kind of want to keep having to push the same thing into the future, and when it doesn't really have wheels and it's very heavy to move that thing. And Disney, like you said, was really, they had a wonderful onboarding experience, and kind of talking about how Walt just started with nothing and was able to take these big risks. Like one of the main buildings where some of the teams are on the main studio lot at Disney. There are the 7 dwarves holding up the roof of the building. They're like built into the facade, and you see it, you're like, that's Disney, But when they walked through there and they were talking about that, they said the reason that that's the case is because they actually were the support and foundation for Disney back in 1937. Where there were doctors that said you can't watch an animated movie that long, it's going to make you sick. And so not only did they have all this like very bad press working against them at the time, but they also had doctors calling against it. They had theaters that were not willing to show the movie, and then it ended up being one of they would have gone bankrupt. They would have not been what they are today without that kind of success. And then same thing with Disneyland. It was the exact same thing. Walt just really he loved trains, and so he just wanted to build a big train set, and then have people ride it and have fun. And that was the ABC building is where that original plot was going to go. But then he ended up buying the Orange Grove, and the rest is history on that front too. So really interesting to see all of those risks. And I think that just not only does it make an amazing story to tell, but I think that just makes a lot more fun of a kind of situation too, when it comes to technology or just innovation in general. It's nice to keep some things boring, and to like production, it's great to keep boring, but that should never, you should never get complacent, is my opinion on that. I feel like that's always good to ask those questions. What if, and always try to push yourself in that regard.
And what is the company's attitude toward using open source software? Because a company, with deep pockets like Disney is probably, they could use any commercial software available, but a lot of the stuff in the cloud native world is mostly open source. So yeah, what was the attitude where you were working with open source software?
So I'd say it was really good, because not only does if you're able to take in an open source project and kind of build on top of that, I think that was kind of more the sentiment, and that's really what I see in a lot of enterprises. Talking with friends and other people within the tech community, is that in my opinion, the best way to use open source is either use it directly if you have the time. It does cost you time and money to operate and to build on top of these things. In some cases, it makes more sense to buy the SaaS product, or we just don't have time to come up to speed to this. It's one example I can think of is like EKS. We could run Kubernetes on our own, but much happier to pay somebody to deal with etcd headaches and control plane issues, rather than deal with those directly, because because we have, that's not our core business at Disney, is to fix that infrastructure, to get the applications up and running, and then provide those great experiences for people working at studios, get those movies out, help the storytellers write the stories, keep that IP protected, and then just kind of care about those other security concerns. But I'd say that the overall sentiment towards open source is really good, and even seeing like Pixar has released a lot of their tooling. I think that they're in a partnership with the CNCF. It's like a different division,
Really?
and
I had
they've
no idea.
released. They've released a lot of software on that front for like rendering, and I think it is like opensource.disney.com, or it's I can find the link and send it to you at some point in time. But they have a couple really good examples out there. And then to kind of consume open source internally, they had a really great program that brought all of the legal team and security team, and just kind of like to vet all of this process to make sure that people were using the products as intended. Like it would be the worst to use an open source project and then just kind of like ship out sensitive data, everywhere. We want to make sure everything was a good fit too. So really good opportunity to kind of and learn from others too. Like, oh hey, this division in the company did this last week. We just went through this. Here's some pointers and tips. And so it was like it ended up being a really good networking thing as well. Most companies, it's like it's the paperwork. I gotta get this open source library approved. It's gonna take 2 years. Not the case in my experience. It moved along very quickly, which was quite nice.
You mentioned security concerns quite a lot during the past couple of minutes, so I'm guessing that must have been like a huge thing for Disney. Like how to avoid like leaks and spoilers coming out and all that kind of stuff for the upcoming movies. Was that like something that the division that you worked on had to be aware of? Those sorts of things.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Thank goodness I didn't see any, two major items or anything like that while I was employed at Disney Studios. But it was just all of the and obviously can't talk too in depth on that one. But there are some just really cool technologies when it comes to making sure everything is protected. And as somebody is screening a movie or making sure that the subtitles came right or it rendered correctly, there's just so much cool technology I wish I could talk about that factors into what if that were to leak, what if that were to get shared, as well as just kind of just very interesting conversations on that front. But definitely something that was always kind of first of mind. I'd say that taking a look at the movie industry, I'd say that's kind of like that's the defining factor, is if this is pre-release content, if this is like red zone content, how do we keep that most secure? Can we put this on an air-gapped network? If we do, how do we deal with that? Those become really interesting concerns. I think that hearing some stories about people that have worked in government and everything else, kind of like it all feels like a very similar space in the way that different companies go to treat some of the resources.
Yeah, well, I don't think if leaking the Avengers is at the same level of national security as
I don't know,
or the missile codes or something. Well, yeah. So
That's funny.
after Disney, then you moved to HashiCorp, which is where you're currently at, and you started a role as you started working as developer advocate. So I wanted to ask you, about what the job of developer advocate or developer relations, what the job entails, because I'm under the impression that it's starting to become more and more important. Do you feel that same way, especially in companies that are related to cloud technology, if the role of developer advocate or developer relations, the one that we're sort of doing right now, is more important than ever before?
Absolutely. I'd say that when it comes to that was the thing I really liked doing at Disney, was getting to work with these teams. But like you said, being Disney, there's a lot of things I was not able to talk about. There are a lot of practices I'd love to share even today, but are all protected things and things I can't talk about. And so I want to do that. I want to share. I work within the Kubernetes space as a contributor in like special SIG release and SIG docs, special interest group, SIG. And so kind of that's a mentality I always want to bring to the table, and made HashiCorp such an interesting opportunity when that came about. I liked talking with teams and not just coding, but being able to talk about the why of why we did that with our code. And
Right.
again, how can we make this better? What do you think? Getting that feedback loop going, and then just like starting a project, starting a community, and focusing on that community. I'd say that that's most relevant now, especially because we're just on the cusp of finally being able to go out again and see people again, travel, kickstarting again. Hoping that really ramps up later this year. And I feel like because of we've had this year of not being able to do that, we've been able to call people and connect with people. But that sense of community, I feel like is just really it's really hurting right now. And I think that Clubhouse and all of these like podcasts and all of these other mediums in which people can communicate, I've seen a lot more people dive deep into them because there's that want for connection. And I'd say that that's at the end of the day, that's what I see a developer advocate as, is somebody who really listens to the community and brings that feedback back to the product teams and just tries the best that they can to really eliminate the developer experience or just the day-to-day pains that most teams feel. I think that it should be when you use a tool, it should be easy to use. It should just seamlessly drop into your workflow and really elevate you. I think that it becomes less of like, hey, look at what Terraform did. Look what I did. I stood up this whole infrastructure. You kind of like the tool kind of blends into the workflow and you forget about it. If if it is successful, in my opinion. And so I think that that's a very important thing for companies to focus on, especially right now, because just checking in with their community, see how they're doing, and try to help them out by just making it more seamless when using their tools, methodologies, or workflows.
So seeing as that your role puts you really close to the community and to the developers that end up using HashiCorp products, the end users, does that translate, or do you get a say in the direction that the company then will take with regards to new products? How does that process work at HashiCorp?
So the way that it works right now, we actually just launched I'm blanking on the URL, but we just launched a website yesterday, kind of showing our methodologies and how we work with teams across HashiCorp, how we, what is kind of like what are some workflows that we found really useful as a company and as a whole. And I think that's definitely a great resource to check out. But when it comes to I really like working at HashiCorp because of that ability to talk directly with people and bring that back to those product teams, and I feel like I do have a say and a stake in kind of how some of these things get developed. I think that when I go and I talk to product managers, there's always this sentiment that they really do want to hear what's going on. They're like, oh my goodness, that's we didn't envision that this might be a problem area. Let's go focus on that and dedicate some time to solving this problem. And then other times, I might hear something and get really like, oh my gosh, this is really painful to do, really difficult to do, and then bring that back. And then my favorite times are when I bring that feedback and they go, oh, it's this, try this. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is great. And so I get to learn a lot from that process and then try to give that back to the community in the form of a GitHub repository or blog post or something on that front. So I think that is a lot of fun, and I do like being where I am in that feedback loop. Now I liked that as an end user, but it just feels nice to kind of be in between those two parties and those groups right now.
So what would you say would be the most difficult or maybe not difficult but challenging aspect of this role of communicating, with the end users and with the developers and the communities?
There was a blog post that I recently read that I really enjoyed, and it kind of walked through some of these. Somebody that's a developer advocate, and they had been working for a while in the space, I think like 8-10 years, and they talked a lot about burnout, and just because as a developer advocate, I truly deeply want to help as many people as I can, because I've been in those difficult situations, and I just don't want anyone to have to deal with that going forward. Like if somebody makes a mistake, if somebody messes up, if somebody learns something beneficial, sharing that out with everyone is just that to me is always the right call. I would say some of the more difficult things are, though, with that passion comes, like you can't help everyone. Obviously, you just not enough time. Sorry, but kind of being strategic and whether to be strategic or tactical, I think has been one of the biggest things I've learned over this past year. Is like, instead of these one-off sessions or trying to help these people, you might end up helping 4 or 5 people by having a one-on-one with them, jumping on a Zoom call and walking through something. But you help so many more when you're able to say, or help that one person and then write up that content, get that blog together, because then that immediately scales. Think about, as just apply the same things that you're applying with your infrastructure to what you're trying to do in the community. And so I think that really just trying to help scale people up in that way, or again, just share out that knowledge and figuring out kind of what the best ways to communicate that are, whether that be a Twitter conversation, sharing it out there. Is this a good blog? Is this a good video? What's the medium that's going to have the most resonance? I think are some of the more difficult things to kind of understand unless you've been doing it for a while, and then figuring out how much to take on, really. If you're doing 5 live streams a day, within a week, that's for me, that's absolutely too much. I think that I might be able to do like between 1 and 3 with a lot of preparation beforehand. But I feel like that's the other thing that a lot of people miss, is that preparation beforehand, making sure that the demo works, even if it does, having a recording as insurance in case your stage isn't working the way that it should, or there's problems with the Wi-Fi, or one of your credentials gets invalidated, some things like that. So always learning, always fun.
I'm also sure that a lot of times when you're communicating with the community, you get asked, for features. For feature requests, and they bring up a lot of problems that they're having. So what would be the most common problems or stuff that they ask that they'd like to see HashiCorp build a product or do something about?
Really, on that front, I'd say it is mostly it's my most favorite and least favorite answer in tech. Well, that depends. And I'd say that really some of the biggest things are questions about how to run a specific workflow and how to set up, if you're working with Terraform, how do I set up this repository? If people are building modules, it's, how do I make sure that people are using this module in a consistent way across the organization? Or, or like, does it make sense for us to go from using open source to going to Terraform Enterprise or using Terraform Cloud, as a SaaS? Just kind of like, just really, really specific questions on that front. But I think that those are always really good discussions, because then I get to hear a lot more about that business and give that person opportunity to kind of really think about the intent of what they're trying to do, and if that would make sense. I could keep saying I love working here all day long, and it's true. I just, every time I think about all the things, that it makes me really happy that I'm working at HashiCorp. And one of the key defining things for me as a developer advocate is that while I appreciate people that pay HashiCorp and buy Enterprise and are giving us money, thank you. That does allow me to have a job. But at the same point in time, we do have interactions where somebody might say, I like CloudFormation a lot more. And it's okay for me to say, absolutely, if this works with your workflow, let's dig into this. Let's figure this out. That's the interaction. That's a natural interaction. Do you ever talk to your friend and say something and they're like, oh, well, since you didn't, do this my way, I can't help you. It's like, it's just not really a natural interaction. And so I like the chance and the ability working here to have those natural types of communication with people. And I'm not on the hook for actually selling something to you. I'm here to understand you and then help you, which I just that really fits with my personality. So I'm really happy that I've got that chance. I really feel happy on that front.
Which of the HashiCorp products is the one that excites you the most, and which one excites you the least?
Ooh, that's a good question. Yeah. That's a good question. I would say honestly,
because you mentioned Terraform a lot.
Terraform for sure. Terraform, I'd say, is so I started using HashiCorp products really early. I'd say as soon as Vagrant came along, when Mitchell had worked on that before, HashiCorp really culminated and came together. I was working at American Greetings and the greeting card company here in America, and we set up a lot of our virtualized environments using Vagrant. So have really honestly liked just about the entire stack. Most recently, I'd say Terraform is definitely number one for me, though. I'm starting to kind of come up to speed with Waypoint as well. Being within the Kubernetes space, I really like being able to use that to deploy things and then stand up infrastructure with Terraform and then use Waypoint to kind of deploy that. The project's really coming along. It's at an early stage right now, but definitely worth checking out and kind of giving feedback to that team on what you want to see. I know they've got some really big things planned for 0.3 and 0.4. Right now it's at 0.2, but really, really interesting and fun things coming up on that front. In terms of least, honestly, it's all of the HashiCorp products are so easy to use. It's a hard thing for me to answer, but the one that I'm trying to learn most about right now happens to be I've got a Nomad expert shirt on, and there's still quite I have to learn up on that front. I think that one of the things I'm working on right now is we have all these ways to get Kubernetes up and running pretty easily, whether it be a managed service or KubeADM. There are all these options that we have available to us, and I've seen a few for Nomad, but there to me there's like not I would really like a Terraform module to be able to just spin this up in AWS, GCP, Azure, pretty much whatever my cloud might be. I think that would be an optimal experience for me, and so that's one thing that I'm starting to take a look at with some coworkers and in creating things like that. So also and fun, because then I get to learn about it and kind of battle test it, stress test it, and have fun with that.
So we talk about HashiCorp products, but I want to ask you now, which product made by competitors you'd wish that HashiCorp would have thought of first?
Ooh, that is a wonderful question. I'd say probably just Datadog. Just having that observability platform. I've been a huge fan of Datadog for a long time as well. I've been lucky enough to use that at most jobs I've worked at too since it came about. And I think that's one thing I think that's been said publicly is like people when they were kind of thinking about Waypoint, and we teased that out to the community as like so what do you think that this project might be, and drop hints before we actually announced Waypoint. And a lot of people said, oh, CI/CD or monitoring and metrics. And so I think that was said was like, there are so many companies that do so well at that, Datadog being one of them, that we don't really feel the need to enter into that space. So I think that they just do a fantastic job. And that would have been cool had we thought of something like that. But definitely, when it comes to DevOps, I think everything makes sense the way that things have been developed at HashiCorp. But if we had an extra product, I think that Datadog's SaaS would be quite cool, honestly.
I want to ask this now. So it appears that over time, well, this is my perception, I don't know if you shared that, HashiCorp products have been evolving in the level of abstraction in the same way that developers have been demanding more abstraction from cloud-native tools. So HashiCorp started, at the lowest level with VMs, with Vagrant and Packer, and then moved over to infrastructure automation with Terraform. Now you got tools for identity and access management with Vault. You got orchestration, scheduling, so forth. So what does HashiCorp have in store for the near future with regards to achieving a different or the next layer of abstraction and improving developer experience?
So I do think that Waypoint and Boundary are two really, really helpful, really interesting projects for right now and kind of for what's next. I think that when we took a look at Terraform and saw, Terraform and Vault, I think are some of the biggest things I've seen a lot of interest in right now. And I'd attribute a lot of that success to their ability to be pluggable. And we have modules, we have providers, we have, for Vault secret engines. So if you either want to get an AWS access token and key, you can do that. Or do you want to authenticate with GitHub? There's a plugin for that as well. And kind of seeing that get factored into at least Waypoint. Boundary is definitely something I need to spend some more time with. But yeah, Waypoint I think is really cool because now you have this pluggability for your build step. Do you want us to try to figure this out with cloud native build packs? based on what you're using to version your dependencies, or do you have a Docker file? Oh, okay, we can use that. And then the deploy step, are you deploying to Nomad, Kubernetes, ECS? What are you deploying to Google Cloud Run? What are you deploying to? Being able to kind of and then stack things there. So if you did truly want to go multi-cloud, you have that opportunity and that potential possibility there. And then finally, the release step, now that we've deployed all these applications, let's switch on the traffic. Let's do our canary deploys. Let's handle this process and, let people know in Slack that all this happened and all this went through. So I think that kind of focusing on application delivery as a whole is I feel like that is going to really advance quite a bit within the next few years, as well as just I think that we're setting ourselves up for success in the fact that we have this pluggability, and so whether we want to focus on writing some plugins directly as a company, or as a community member being able to that's something that we fully support and encourage. I think that there was, I can't remember what plugin it was, but seeing the Waypoint team, go back and forth on, do we create this plugin or, and then they said, no, this is a great thing for the community. And just really would kind of show an interest in this. So let's leave this to the community, and which we saw come along. So I thought that was kind of cool too. But I think that's really what's next, as well as kind of moving to the, to kind of just a more secure type of setup. I'm blanking on the name that Google uses for their terminology around how they set up VPNs and security. It's authorization and authentication, all in the same breadth, so you don't have to be on the company's network to access anything. And I think Boundary is going to be great with that too, because even if we use Vault, even if we have these, just-in-time passwords and one-time passwords and all of these awesome pieces of functionality, not being able to SSH into a machine when you need to take a look at something, and there's a good use case to do that, or get access to a database, there's still reasons for people to interact with machines. And so having Boundary to do that after you've deployed your applications, I think is also quite helpful. And I think that will also be another area that just really changes the more that we see things like the SolarWinds attacks and Equifax and all of these things happen. It's just going to make more sense to automate that, audit that, and track that, which those two products will help out quite a bit with.
Apart from your role at HashiCorp, you're also a CNCF ambassador. For those of you folks at home, CNCF is the Cloud Native Computing Foundation. So what does it mean to be an ambassador for the CNCF? What does the job entail? Is it like being a developer advocate, but, I guess with a broader scope of projects to advocate on or something?
Definitely. It's so with that, I'd say it's also just a really good, really great chance to work with some immeasurably talented people, and just hear about those projects. I'd say so. Not only do we kind of act as advocates for the ecosystem in general, and helping out. Like you'll see all of the CNCF ambassadors working within Helm, Kubernetes, CNCF projects, left and right. And so just really people that are knowledgeable on each of those things. I think that's nice to see that representation, and that the CNCF really values that. They'll also typically get pulled in to help on different events. So whether that be KubeCon or, like Rust Days and all of these other efforts, that's another opportunity for CNCF ambassadors to kind of come together and put on events and get feedback from people on how the different projects are going and how they're working, if there's anything that can be added. So I like that. We have regular calls as well to kind of hear about some things that are going on within the community as well. So you might sense a pattern here with community and kind of giving feedback and working with others. But I think that I really do like that focus as well. And then the CNCF was something that I felt was really beneficial to have while at Disney, because when you work for a big enterprise, typically we see this in AI and ML, research groups within places like Apple and other places where people can't publicly speak about most of their work, which is a bummer. It's understandable, but it's still a bummer. And I think that's starting to open up, but being, you never want to conflate working with a place for speaking on behalf of a place. All views are my own type thing. So I think that the CNCF really made me happy that it was a platform that I could use while at Disney to go and talk somewhere, or discuss, give a talk. And I'm here. I'm talking on behalf of the CNCF, or within regards to the CNCF, not on behalf of, but within regards to. So that was just a cool avenue to kind of pursue, and use that as a good place to talk about these things, which is quite fun.
As an ambassador, are you also always on the lookout for new and exciting projects with related to cloud native technology? Where do you go to find some new projects that could serve a purpose within the cloud native community?
So typically, I'll take a look at the CNCF has a repository, and so as projects move from sandbox to incubator to graduated, and I'll typically follow that. Honestly, is the best place to get like an ear on the ground level of what's going on and what some of these projects are. The templates are very well laid out, and so you really can read a lot about what's going on, or what the purpose that that project is trying to solve, which is quite neat. I'd say the other place are the regular calls that we'll have with the CNCF group, and just hearing about some things that are coming up, or some like, oh hey, does anyone have an interest in this, or has anyone seen a project in this space that might solve this problem, and then hearing feedback on that front, like, oh yeah, check this out. One I found out recently was a project called Captain, KEPTN, and that's to help kind of facilitate. It doesn't so much handle your pipelines when you're deploying an application, but it gives you CRDs and some other really cool things to check that you're meeting your SLOs and SLIs as you're deploying an application, so that you aren't deploying these things that either serving up 500 errors or things of that nature. I'm just kind of blown away by the amount of different projects we're seeing enter the community too. Like, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's I'm a big fan of the specialized tools subreddit, and so it kind of feels like that. It's like, oh my gosh, there's a thing that does this, so that's cool to see.
So continuing with that, which of all the many projects that are currently hosted by the CNCF are the ones that you're most excited about?
So honestly, Kubernetes by far and away, obviously, but I think that most people would say that, and just have a lot of familiarity with that. But I think that when it comes to, I'd say that I'd have to think. One that really comes to mind is the Open Policy Agent. So was really happy to see that graduate. And despite working in a place where we've got Sentinel, and that really works well, as it's not so much a product as it is capabilities. When you buy enterprise license of Terraform or Vault or something, that will help you with those workloads. But when it comes to, you need something within the community space, you need something that's open source. I think that OPA, the Open Policy Agent, is an incredible tool. And I like how I didn't like it at first, to be honest, but I did like, after using it a few times, was it's very composable, and it doesn't solve all of your problems. You don't write this policy and then kind of, it's not integrated directly with anything. It kind of operates off to the side. So it's fun to use projects like Gatekeeper, which will use OPA in Kubernetes to run policies, make sure that you're setting all the labels correctly on your namespaces. If you could add a policy so it doesn't run like verybadsoftware.com, no images pulled from there get run, things like that. So you can also put allow lists in for things that you'd want, or deny lists in for things that you wouldn't want. So I think that it's that's quite a cool project as well.
So given that Kubernetes is your favorite by far, as you just mentioned, and you've been a contributor to the project for some time now, how and when did you get involved with becoming a contributor to the Kubernetes project?
So at first, I really wanted to be a CNCF ambassador, because we were using Kubernetes in just about everywhere I worked. I started using Kubernetes before Disney as well, and a couple different jobs and a couple different projects, and really just kind of wanted to find out a way to be involved. And I was really intimidated by directly going to the open source route. I was just like, That's I can't ever do that. And and so I was like, I'll try to be a CNCF ambassador. So I tried for that for a while. And the way that works is that you submit, your application, and then you wait to hear back. You don't have to submit a new application after you've initially done that. They constantly review them and take a look at who's being active within the community, and so they only allow in 2 people every month. And so with a big backlog, with a large backlog, and just kind of the that low acceptance rate every month, that didn't happen for quite some time. So got a little bummed out, and then about it like miraculously at the time I started getting bummed out, I saw on Twitter they said, "Hey, do you want to work on Kubernetes? Here's our shadow survey if you want to work on one of the releases." And that release was 114, was what I got started on. And so I saw that and I was just like, oh my gosh, I can use this passion towards something. This is going to be so much fun. This will be cool. And I signed up for the communications team. And then the rest was history for me with open source, and just kind of shedding that fear of like, I'm not good enough. These people are just, I could never get to that level. You can, and there's so much work to do. You don't have to. My expectation was something like I have to be able to rewrite the orchestrator and, integrate with etcd, and no, you don't have to do any of those things. It's one feature at a time. It's very much like any project. You could look at the culmination of all the efforts, but it's so many people that were passionate and wanted to get these things done. And it's just one step at a time. It's okay. No rush to reinvent the world. And even if it's you completely replacing a paragraph or a line in the documentation that then helps so many more people understand that topic or that concept or that feature, that's so meaningful. And so that's something that that's kind of what did it for me, and has made me excited about that. I've gone on to lead the 119 release for Kubernetes, and right now I'm an emeritus advisor for 121, and it's just a really fun project to work on. There's so many cool people involved in the project, and even the shadow surveys that we're sending out now for each release, we've gotten back so many people. I think it was around like 120 people, and we only had 36 slots to fill. So though we never like giving that, like, sorry you didn't make the cut this time, we've gotten so many more roles, responsibilities, and things like that when it comes to the project, to be able to pull people in and to include them. And so if anyone listening wants to get involved, feel free to please at me, anywhere on the internet as OnlyDole, ONLYDOLE. But if you're thinking about getting involved in an open source project, I'm going to push you over the fence and say, just do it. Make sure that it works for you and it kind of fits with what your intentions are, what you're trying to do. Like if I don't have any want to get involved in security, wouldn't make sense for me to join SIG auth, right? And so things like that, I would say that there is a place in a project as big as Kubernetes for just about for literally everyone in just about every context that exists, which is quite nice.
You said you were a release lead. So how do you lead, such an effort, considering the magnitude of a project like Kubernetes, which has thousands of contributors, thousands of issues on GitHub, and hundreds of pull requests? How do you deal with the magnitude?
So really with that, it's I'd say most release leads that you'll talk to, I feel like what they'll say is they just really just getting out of the way and helping each of the different leads within their different areas as much as possible. As a release lead, it's you're a manager managing managers when it comes to things like that. So when it comes time for you to do things, that's mostly in communication. If there's a confusion about which direction to go, jumping in and being able to offer feedback and having that experience. Most release leads have been through the release cycle about 3 times. Typically, by the time they get to that level, typically you'll be a shadow for 2 cycles, and then a lead of a specific area like communications or enhancements or bug triage, and then after that you can get selected as a release lead shadow, which I did, and with within 118, and then 119 actually got to lead. But I'd say that really with that, it's just figuring out the best ways to help your team. It's a lot less of providing the direction for everyone, because a lot of the roles are really well defined, and like everyone has their marching orders, and it's very, very clear what they need to do in most cases. But if there is any confusion, that's the time to step in. And then at the end of the release, I'd say that's absolutely when it really starts to ramp up. It goes from 4 or 5 hours of commitment a week to probably about 15 to 20, and just checking to make sure everything is the way it should be. Kubernetes has a Kubernetes enhancement proposal methodology. So if there's so when you want to contribute, or even if you don't have the time to do it, somebody might pick up a KEP and go and enact that enhancement. And so with that, each step of the process is the proposal. Somebody goes out and codes that, then tests get written, then documents get written, documentation for that feature or that ability get used, that gets written up, and then it moves into alpha, then beta, then finally GA if everything goes well on that front. But there are some features that might not make it, and the community is starting to get to a point where we're going to be going through those and defining some better criteria on. Nope, this has been in alpha for several cycles. There's not a lot of use cases, not a lot of people using it, so we're gonna deprecate this and end up removing that. So now we move into that fun kind of gardening aspect of the community and of these releases.
So it seems like, or it seemed for a time, that there's been a divide in the cloud compute world between the serverless camp, the serverless, we understand as functions as a service, lambdas or Azure functions, whatever, serverless on the one side, and then you got the container camp on the other side, the Docker, Kubernetes, and and all the container ecosystem. But it seems to be that lately the lines dividing those camps seem to blur. So you, for example, you got stuff like Fargate on AWS, Google Cloud Run, Azure Container instances, which sort of seem to take the best of both worlds, the best of serverless and the best of containers. So what I want to ask you is, do you see a near future in which the underlying infrastructure, whether it's functions, containers, or just a plain or virtual machine, will that become a non-issue among developers, and it's just, here's my code, I want it to run on the cloud, do whatever you want with it, whether it's using HashiCorp products like Terraform under the hood or stuff like that?
I do think that, again, a fantastic question. I'd say that I've talked a lot about this with a former colleague of mine, Stephen Wilcox. I've got to give him a shout out. And we've talked about we want to see this future where we know we're writing an application, what language it's written in doesn't really matter. We want to have storage. And we're done. If we can define this minimal set of things that we need, I think that it will be the future for sure. It just application, yes, no, storage, yes, no, and some other minimal concerns, and you're off to the races. I think that we'll get to that point too, because, and I feel like we're getting closer, because things like Kubernetes, things like Nomad are giving you the ability to kind of have this abstraction layer. And then, kind of what is it? And then I'll take care of the rest. And so the lines do blur for me. And I'm starting to get into understanding how some serverless workflows are enabled and how they work. When does it make sense to have a long running process, or have, do you care about cold starts and warm starts? Do these things matter to you? Even working with teams that use cron jobs and just jobs in Kubernetes, does that make sense? Do you really need a cron job? Could this be like a consumer producer type setup or model? What makes sense for you? So I think that that's the long answer. The short answer is yes, absolutely. Lines are definitely blurred, and I'm excited to see them blur, because then that just means that we're getting better at writing technology that is better able to kind of sense what data it's working with, what are the use cases and the patterns and the types. I again would love to get to a point in the future where it's just like, what's the architectural pattern you're trying to use here? Oh, okay, we got it. And kind of run from there.
What do you see as the future of cloud computing, and what's the direction that you would like to see, the major cloud vendors, whether AWS, GCP, Azure, and not just the cloud vendors, but the cloud ecosystem take? What direction would you like them to take in the future, whether it's, the near future or the far future?
I would say, I would say just that developer experience, making that a lot easier to use, and just kind of pouring more time and effort into places like that. So when it comes to, I'm biased here, of course, but Terraform examples or infrastructure as code examples, and just kind of sensing some of the workflows and the patterns a little bit more of the community. It's nice to have all these tools and this composability to put all these things together, but kind of, I've liked that from what I've seen from all the cloud vendors, is that, as time has gone on, giving us an option to run Kubernetes as a managed service, and then starting to better incorporate that. Like, I'm seeing a lot more from all major clouds on, what's going on in this namespace, what's this deployment look like, and getting data and metrics back on that, and making it easier to track that as well. But I'd say just more to kind of get off the ground up and running in the cloud a lot easier would be a fantastic focus, as well as some secure by default patterns that make things easier too. One of my favorites when introducing teams or working with teams on Terraform is locking people out, allowing them access to the GUI, but then kind of locking it down and giving them read-only access, because you should be able to version and make your infrastructure declarative. So kind of going through that exercise is really helpful. Like, I shouldn't be clicking around right now. I should just be able to use my infrastructure as code to spin this up and get things working in that manner. But it's fine that I have read-only access. I can inspect that everything is how I want it to actually be.
Taylor, thank you so much. It has been a wonderful conversation, and looking forward to seeing all the cool stuff that HashiCorp. Next time I'm watching Disney Plus or anything by Disney, I'm going to pay close attention to everything that's happening. Not just behind the scenes, but like behind the scenes with the stuff that you told us at the beginning. So yeah, thanks, man.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Mario. Thank you all for listening. And this is fun. This is awesome.
Yep, likewise. All right. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Rocket to the Cloud. This episode is brought to you by Booster, an open source initiative by the Agile Monkeys. Visit booster.cloud and theagilemonkeys.com to learn more. Links are in the description. If you like this episode, click the like button and subscribe to our channel. And if you're listening to the podcast version, don't forget to subscribe. See you all on the next episode.